everyone. So this is just to tie up a little bit the lecture from yesterday on evolution. Please remember evolution, natural selection, genetic drift, and how all of that affects how a population can evolve, and all of that affects the different traits that can emerge from populations and from species. So what has been the evidence for evolution? So we've got a lot of different fields that have given us evidence for evolution. Paleontology, which is the fossil records; biogeography, why different species exist in only certain areas; morphology, embryology, biochemical or molecular markers. Okay, so when we're going to start off with looking at how morphology or anatomy could help us discover that there is evolution and there is a common descent and things like that. First of all, we have structures, anatomical structures that are called homologous structures. They're body parts with similar structure but possibly different functions. And they're actually structures that come from a common ancestor and then evolve into different, very similar structures, but with maybe possibly different functions. And then you also have analogous structure. This has a lot to do with biogeography. So they are similar structures. So they can be, for example, wings in a butterfly and wings in a bat. They fulfill the same function, right? So that the bat and the butterfly can fly. But they develop in organisms that share a common ecosystem. They share a common, for example, biogeographical region, but not a common ancestry. Okay. So what are some examples of these structures? Homologous structures, for example, can be these bones that we can find in different organisms, in different tetrapods. So that's just organisms that have these 4 legs, okay? And they're actually organisms that contain 5 digits to their hands, okay? So you can see this in humans, you can see this in cats, you can see this in whales, and you can see this in bats. And the reason why you can see all of these structures that are so similar is because they all come from a common ancestor. You can also see molecular homology. So the sequence in DNA and proteins is a molecular record of evolutionary relationships. There's a reason why we have such a conserved language, which is DNA, and it is so similar across so many species. And there's also a reason why amino acids are triplets, triplet nucleotides, and they're in the form of codons in all of these species, and it's because of the fact that we all come from a common ancestor. Okay, so that's also evidence of evolution. Analogous structure, remember, it doesn't have to do with common descent, it has to do with common ecosystems. So you can have something that's called convergent evolution. So that means that in different different organisms that come from different ancestors develop the same traits, and it's because the same traits are beneficial for that ecosystem. So they don't have a common descent, they simply have similar traits. And they have similar traits because they've been favored by natural selection because they live in the same ecosystem. So this can be, for example, in dolphins, and the fins of dolphins are completely independent in the evolutionary standpoint, let's say, to the fins of sharks. Sharks are fish, dolphins are mammals. So they do not come from the same common ancestor, not at least recently, but they developed the same fin because it was beneficial for their ecosystem. We can also see evolution through our vestigial organs. So this can be, for example, remnants or things that no longer really function. This little foot-like bone in different sea animals is not necessarily functional, but it stays there because it is a vestigial organ, is a remnant of past common ancestors. Okay, we can also see this in human beings. For example, our appendix is a vestigial organ. We can see this in different cartilages that we have in our forearms. Some people can have it, some people do not have to have it, and it's not necessarily beneficial or not beneficial, so it's a vestigial organ, or our wisdom teeth. There's also a lot of people like me, for example, that were born without wisdom teeth because we simply do not need them. They're vestigial, they're not necessary. They do not necessarily fulfill a function on today's population. We can also see some evidence of evolution through our embryology. So what you can see, and you can see this whenever you are looking at an embryo from a chicken and an embryo from a human, in the very early stages of embryology, we look very much alike. And it's because we're producing all of the same things that will eventually be specialized and changed. But at the very beginning of the embryo's development, we're producing, for example, tails, okay? We're producing slits within close to our respiratory system that will eventually in human beings become lungs, like right over here, okay? And in fish it will become gills, okay? We can also have a little bit of evidence for evolution through fossils. Fossils, what's super interesting about fossils is that you can actually explain the missing links. So many times you know that two organisms do have a common ancestor, but you cannot find the common ancestor, of course, because of the fact that that common ancestor has been extinct. But if you can find a fossil, you can find a link, right? So in this specific, for example, horses, all of the different types of horses that you can find today, you can also compare them with fossils of horses and find missing links that tie up different species of horses that we have today roaming the earth. Biogeographical evidence is also super important. This has to do with endemism, which is when you can find a species in only one biogeographical region. We have a lot of this specifically in Galapagos. And what that means is that a common ancestor probably migrated to that region, and then all of these species developed from that common ancestor. And that's also why you can't find them in other places. We can also see evolution at the cellular level, and this is probably one of the key ideas that ties to we all evolved from prokaryotes. Okay, so we've got all of these domains. They are the biggest taxonomical organization system. So remember, kingdom, family, and all of those different genus, species, all of those organizational systems are taxonomic. They try to group similar species together. These domains are the ones that are the most broad. So you've got archaea, which are prokaryotes, bacteria, also prokaryotes, and eukarya, which are eukaryotic organisms. And what we can see is that we all have some conserved features like DNA and RNA and different metabolic pathways. They're all shared among all organisms because they're so basic to our survival that they have not changed through evolution. And that also tells us that the original organism, the first living being, had to have had some remnant of these processes or of this DNA and RNA and passed it on to everything else that evolved from that. Okay, what are some core features specifically in eukaryotes that are shared among eukaryotes? Cytoskeleton, nucleus, membrane-bound organelles, linear chromosomes, endomembrane system. So all of this is shared among all eukaryotes, so it does tell you that we share a common ancestor. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. Yes, I'm going to leave it there. This is just a quick idea of how we have proven evolution and the different lines of evidence that allows us to prove evolution. Thank you very much.